Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Mr., as we can see here, Lyney, Linnaeus, Lenny. I don't know how to say his name, but we're just going to be calling him Lyney for now. Maybe if I'll change it, who knows. But we're going to be talking about this character today. We're going to do a guide, per se, talking about his kit, going through the whole motions of how he works, or that mumbo-jumbo that we all know how a guide works. But I do want to preface the video by saying this is being recorded well before 4.0, so this is all subject to change. The percentages, the general kind of small kind of functionalities are subject to change, but the general scope of the greater scope of how he's going to work should still roughly be the same. So hopefully that's outlined it, and we can now get right into the guide. So the quick outline for his Ascension materials. So going into this, you're going to just need the classic Treasure Hoarder badges, as well as the new Sumerian Dragon boss materials to ascend it higher, as well as the collectible material from Fontaine. Obviously, once it unlocks, you'll be able to collect the flowers, as well as a specific Fontaine material boss. But other than that, it's just the badges as well as pyro crystals to get him up. So it's pretty easy. You can pre-farm the badges. It's pretty hefty on the amount, but you can still pre-farm it. And the other thing on his profile is that he's a crit rate ascension stat man. 24.2% at level 90 for his ascension stat is very good, by the way. It means, essentially, if you have crit rate or crit damage, you're a main DPS character, which he in fact is. Going into his actual kit, we have a lot to discuss, so let's slow down and go through it. So taking a look at his normal attack, because it is an important part of his kit. So normal attack, card, force, translocation. The normal and plunging part, not so important, but the charge attack is very important. Simply put, he has two levels of his charge attack. The normal level 1 is just a pyro infusion, but the level 2 fires off what we call a prop arrow. That deals pyro damage, and upon hit, it will summon a Grin Malkin hat. I'll get into that in just a moment as to what that is. But furthermore, when firing the prop arrow and when Lyney has more than 60% HP, he will consume a portion of his HP to obtain 1 stack of prop surplus to a maximum of 5 stacks. This effect will be removed 30 seconds after you're out of combat, and the lowest Lyney can drop through this method to is 60% of his max HP. Wow, that's a lot of information. So you summon a Grin Malkin hat at level 2 charge, as well as consume some HP if you're above 60%, and gain 1 prop surplus stack. Now, those prop surplus stacks, remember those? We're going to talk about those in the elemental skill section. For now, what is a Grin Malkin? Well, a Grin Malkin can taunt nearby opponents and attract their attacks. Each opponent can only be taunted by a hat once every 5 seconds, which is a bit of an odd time, seeing as they have a duration of 4 seconds, but fair enough. But once every 5 seconds, the hat will inherit a percentage of Lyney's max HP, so you'll just essentially have more HP, maybe have more tankiness, and then if destroyed or the duration expires, it will fire off a pyrotechnic strike at one nearby opponent, dealing pyro damage. Only one hat can exist at any given time unless you have a certain constellation. That's another bit of information, and that's the Grin Malkin, which, by the way, is very useful because it's you can summon them very frequently, as there is no technical internal cooldown to their summoning. You just only can have one up at a time, so once one's destroyed, shoot another level 2 charge shot, and you get another tanky enemy, right, or tankier ally to absorb damage. But the last part of this thing is the Arc Pneuma, which is, at certain intervals, the prop arrow will cause a Spirit Breath Thorn to descend upon its hit location, dealing Pneuma-aligned damage. That Pneuma-aligned damage part, the aligned part, means absolutely fucking nothing. It should have just said pyro damage, but that is his whole kit. You can consume HP, summon Grin Malkin hats, which are little aggro generators, gain prop surplus stacks, as well as just deal pyro damage through a lot of areas. Very useful, very handy, overall great, but the percentages we have to also talk about. So at level 10, we're not going to look at 13 because this is a 5-star character. At level 10, what are the percentages? So for the level 2 charge shot, we got 311%. It's pretty good. The HP consumption per shot is 20% though. Let's think about that for a second. 20% HP consumption to shoot one level 2 charge shot above 60%. If you're at 100%, you can only really gain 2 stacks of prop surplus per kind of interval. Then you'll have to heal up to 100, do another 2 stacks, and then heal up again to get that one last stack if you want to go up to the 5 stacks, which you probably will do once we get to that skill. So the consumption is quite hefty, and I expect either the consumption to change or the lowest HP threshold that Lyney can go to with this method change. One of these two will change. I suspect the 60% here will most likely change. So one of those will change. After that, the Grin Malkin inherits 115% of Lyney's HP, which is overall really useful, and the duration of the Grin Malkin is 4 seconds, as I mentioned earlier, and so essentially you'll just have a second Lyney on the field that will just generate aggro for 4 seconds, which is overall great. But when the Grin Malkin explodes, you'll be dealing 382% as damage through the Pyrotechnic Strike, which is surprisingly a lot of damage. And then that Spirit Thorn Breath through the Pneuma attack will be doing 50% every 6 seconds, which is overall useless. Pretty much just forget about this Spirit Breath Thorn. It's just going to be an extra bit of pyro application per se every single 6 seconds. And overall, his charge attack is extremely important and very useful, but it's not his core part of his kit. You see these values and they are pretty high, but it's not a core part of his kit. The core part of his kit is his elemental skill, but this is still a very important part as this is your main method of getting those prop surplus stacks, which works with his elemental skill. The only problem with this normal attack is that the HP consumption is overly high, or the threshold is way too high as well. So one of those will change, but overall a very useful charge attack and is nifty. Now going on to that illustrious elemental skill that I've been mentioning, the Bewildering Lights. Lyney does a flourish with his hat, unleashing a firework surprise, and then when used, he will clear all of his current prop surplus stacks. He clears them out and deals AoE pyro damage to opponents in front of him. So it's essentially a frontal attack. Be careful with your usage of this. The damage will be increased according to the stacks cleared, and this will also regenerate Lyney's HP based on his max HP. Very good. And then the last part here is when Grin Malkin hats created by Lyney are on the field, the fireworks will cause it to explode, dealing AoE pyro damage equal to that of a Pyrotechnic Strike. The damage dealt through this method is considered a charged attack damage. A lot of information, all very good. It's just pyro damage, pyro damage, pyro damage. You deal a lot of damage, so going over to level 10 again, the actual skill by itself, with no stacks of prop surplus, does 301%. It's okay. It's okay amount of damage. Nothing too crazy. But each stack... Now, this is where a bit of maths has to be at play, by the way. I want to preface that I've done no maths, and it's a lot of theory going on, and I'm not the most intellectual mathematical man, but I'm just going to give you an example of how it's going to work. But each stack of prop surplus will essentially add an extra 95.8% onto this 300. That's the way that I'm going to look at it. Now, that's not the actual way that it works. At least I can't confirm that that's the actual way it works, as it involves cross-referencing and mathematically kind of figuring it out. So I'm not going to give a definitive answer of when that's how it works. But that's the way that I'm going to simply put it forward, is that each stack consumed of prop surplus will just add 95 to this 301. Essentially, if you consume 5 stacks at level 10, you're making this 300 into 800, which is pretty good. 800% skill damage is nothing to really scoff at, so pretty good. And then last part was each stack heals Lyney for 20% of his max HP, which is overall pretty useful, but kind of redundant as you can't go below 60, and so it's kind of a weird back and forth that you might want to be going 2 shots, skill, 2 shots, but that also might not work because skill cooldown is 15 seconds, and so it's a bit weird, but overall his skill can scale really highly if it works, as maybe I've said, or if it works in a different way, it might even be even better. And then jumping into the interesting ultimate that he has, Wondrous Trick Miracle Parade. Unleashing his magic light, he turns himself into a Grin Malkin hat that can move around quickly. But don't mistake this for the Grin Malkin hat that he summons through his charge attack. They are 2 separate things. When the Grin Malkin hat gets close to an opponent, it will send out flames falling down on them, dealing at most 1 instance of pyro damage to each opponent. And then when the duration ends, he will dismiss the Grin Malkin hat and ignite fireworks that deal AoE pyro damage. So you summon 1 Grin Malkin hat as well, and then grant yourself 1 prop surplus stack. But the last part, though, I want to address very specifically is that the Grin Malkin hat, cat, whatever the ultimate is, can be actively cancelled. Now, the reason I want to mention this is that this is the second character in the game that MiHoYo has added that has a cancelable ultimate. The previous one was Deya. Now, if you guys have been paying attention to Genshin news, Deya wasn't received overly well, and this was one of the reasons. Now, I'm not saying that the ultimate shouldn't be cancelable, but hopefully with Lyney's release, they have a better kind of fail-safe of not accidentally cancelling the ultimate, because if you're able to accidentally cancel the ultimate, it really just does reduce the value of the ultimate by a large percentage of just accidentally being able to fat finger the button and boom, it's gone. So if they have a failsafe for this, then it's really good. If they don't, then it's essentially Daya 2.0, where it's shit. But regardless, let's go back to the actual core part of the kit. Let's talk about what it actually is. So if you want to just imagine the gameplay, it's like Kirara's elemental skill, but just make it bigger and pyro damage. That's all it is. You just move around fast as like a weird object with a cat inside it, and you move around dealing damage. Now, this one, it's pyro, and it's cool. And at the end of it, you deal a massive bit of damage. Now, the percentages are pretty good. So the actual skill when you come in contact with the enemies, 277, pretty good. But the firework explosion, which is that last part after the duration ends, 345%, very good. Very, very good. Duration of the move around ability is 3 seconds, cooldown 15, energy cost 60. Overall, his ultimate is well-rounded in terms of dealing damage. Very, very well-rounded. It's not too long, the cooldown's not too large, as well as the energy cost for the amount of damage that you deal is pretty reasonable. If it was 80 cost, then it would be a bit too costly for the amount of damage, because the contact damage portion of this is kind of like shit, to be quite frank with you. I don't like contact damage abilities, kind of like Kirara or Sayu. I don't really vibe with them, and I don't think they're that great. But the last part of it is very good. So overall, his ultimate, very useful, but be careful of that cancelling part, as it can be brutal if it's a very easy to cancel ability. And last thing to talk about with his basic kit, the standalone kit, is his passive. So looking at the first one, Perilous Performance. If Lyney consumes HP when firing off a prop arrow, which is his charge 2 attack, the Green Malkin Hat summoned by the arrow will, upon hitting an enemy, restore 3 energy to Lyney and increase damage dealt by 80% of his attack. Roundabout way of doing it, but that's what it is. It's pretty useful. The energy recharge is more so useful than the actual damage, because this is not going to be a core part of doing damage, but still good nonetheless. Going on to passive 2, Conclusive Ovation. This one's a big one. When dealing damage to opponents affected, by Pyro, Lyney will receive the following buffs. A base attack increase of 60%, very, very curious there. Each Pyro party member other than Lyney will also cause this effect to receive a further 20% bonus, which is incredible as well. And then Lyney can only gain a total of 100% increased damage to opponents affected by Pyro in this way. Hold up. There's a lot of stuff to break down here. So I'm unsure if this is a typo. Again, I have no way of confirming. But if the wording of this is correct, the base attack increase by 60 is incredibly powerful, as it increases the percentage scaling of your other attack increases instead of just adding an extra scaling thing. So simply put, if you have 100 base attack, this will, if it is worded correctly, that will increase that base 100 to 160, not make it the end result 160. Makes the scaling a lot better. But furthermore, each party member that is Pyro other than Lyney increases this bonus. Now that gives us a hint, and it is confirmed, by the way, through the weapon as well, that Lyney is going to be a Pyro-centric team, and he's essentially a pure Pyro damage dealer. Reacting isn't too big in his kit, seeing as if you want to get the full bonus from this, you're going to need 3 Pyro members in the party, which includes Lyney, so it's going to be Lyney, Bennett, and one other Pyro character, whoever you want to run. Bennett isn't even guaranteed, but it's still a good choice. And you can only get 100, so 3 characters is kind of like the bare minimum for Pyro usage out of this ability. And as for the last passive, it displays the location of Fontaine resources, yada yada yada. It's always the first 5 stars character of that new zone. That's always their ability. Very good, very great, very powerful character, by the way. Looking at his kit standalone, great character. He's the first 5-star, great character. A bit tricky to use, a bit tricky, I will say. I don't think he's going to be a fluid usage experience. I think it's going to be a bit more, you have to understand times, stacks, kind of rotations. I think that's going to be a core part of his thing. But once you get the hang of the character, I think he's going to be an absolute powerhouse in terms of Pyro damage. But that's specifically where it's going to end. I don't think he's going to be a reactor. I think he's going to be kind of like a raw damage dealer. Kind of in that area of, because everything is just Pyro damage. There's no anything else. It's attack boosting, Pyro damage dealing, and you need 3 Pyro characters to kind of get usage out of his passive. So very good character overall, and he's also pretty good. Thumbs up. But constellations make a better man. The constellations do empower him substantially. Taking a look at his first constellation, Whimsical Wonders. Lyney can now have 2 Grin Malkin hats present at once. Standalone, that's a flat increase of the amount that you can have, so you can essentially have 2 Taunters which is really good. Additionally, prop arrows will summon 2 Grin Malkin hats and grant Lyney 1 extra stack of prop surplus. Overall great, but that last part is followed by this effect can occur once every 15 seconds, which is unfortunately a bit of a limitation. Now, overall, it's a fine Constellation 1. It increases your kind of usefulness and the tempo of your gameplay as you gain more prop surplus stacks per kind of 15 seconds, I guess. So it's pretty good, pretty useful, but unfortunately that 15-second cooldown does ruin that last part, but the 2 Grin Malkins is pretty good. Going on to his second constellation, Loquacious Cajoling, which is a great name by the way. When Lyney is on the field, he will gain a stack of Crisp Focus every 2 seconds. This will increase his crit damage by 20%, maximum 3 stacks. This effect is cancelled when he leaves the field. Very powerful. Constellation 2, by the way. I expect this to be moved somewhere. I don't know why. I'm very hesitant to think that this is Constellation 2, because a maximum of a 60% crit damage increase just for being on the field for 6 seconds sounds a bit too good to be a Constellation 2. But if it is Constellation 2 as the final product, very powerful. Obviously, I don't need to explain the power of 60% crit damage. C3, though, unfortunately here, I think there might be a typo. It says normal attack increase. I highly doubt that it is a normal attack level up, rather. Sorry, I said increase. It says level up. I highly doubt it is. But if it isn't, then that's elemental skill there, because his C5 is elemental burst. Going on to C4, though, after an opponent is hit by his pyro charge attack, the opponent's pyro resistance is decreased by 20% for 6 seconds. Overall, good for solo play. And then C6, Guarded Smile. When Lyney fires a prop arrow, he will fire a Pyrotechnic Strike reprised that will deal 80% of a Pyrotechnic Strike's damage. This is considered charge attack damage. That's his constellations. Very, very powerful. Every single one of the gameplay ones are very powerful. They're all very good. But I have to give a value of each of them. And the simple stopping point is, again, C2. It's mostly C2 for a lot of these characters. Now, here is the reason why. I'm not sure about the specifics of his C3. That's really kind of the reason. If his elemental skill is leveled up through C3, then C4 is a stopping point, because C4 gives you Pyro Resistance Shred. Now, if we take a look at his passive again, which means that you're going to be having to run 3 Pyro characters in your 4-character team, not a lot of characters that are Pyro do Pyro Res Shredding. So being able to get some Pyro Res Shredding through his kit is useful. But then again, he's a 5-star character, and the uncertainty of C3 here, which I assume is elemental skill, but this might have been a small typo. If it isn't a small typo, C3 sucks, by the way, because leveling up his normal attack to level 13 doesn't really provide much value. So still, my stopping point is going to be C2, because you get utility through C1 and you get damage through C2. Any further than that, you're kind of losing a bit of value, because it's, again, not overly what you need. Getting those small percentage increases aren't going to make him much greater, but the 60% crit damage is unparalleled. Now, weapons. Now, this area is obviously super simple to kind of come to an easy conclusion when it comes to the 5 stars. Obviously, his best in slot is going to be his signature weapon, the first Great Magic. But, I should say, it's going to be a best in slot by a very large margin. Now, I don't want to diminish too greatly the other options: the Hunter's Path, Thundering Pulse, Aqua Simulacra, Polar Star, Amos Bow, Skyward Harp. I don't want to diminish those too greatly. They're still fine options if you want to build this character. If you don't have the investment potential for the first Great Magic, these are fine choices. But the first Great Magic plays to his strong suits to an unparalleled level. So let's talk about it. So the bow is base attack 608 and then crit damage boost by 66.2%. Overall, great damage dealer weapon, DPS weapon. But the ability is where it kind of funnels into his specific playstyle. So attack increase by 12% flat line, always very good. And then for every party member with the same elemental type as the wielder, including the wielder themselves, you gain 1 gimmick stack. For every party member with the different elemental type from the wielder, gain 1 theatric stack. When the wielder has 1, 2, 3 or more gimmick stacks, you gain 8, 16, or 40% attack increase. When the wielder has 1, 2, 3 or more theatric stacks, you gain 4, 7, and 10% movement speed increase. Now, if you remember that passive again, we're having multiple of the same element as Lyney, who is Pyro, so having 1, 2, 3 Pyro characters, including Lyney in the team, you get that higher base attack increase, you get the same effect here, but it's an attack increase of a percentage from your base attack. And that difference there, though, the reason it's so good is because the difference, 8%, 16%, and then somehow 40%. I thought it was going to be maybe 32% because that's a double of the previous one. They went for 40, which is incredibly powerful, by the way. So this is why it's such a focus in on it, is that it's pretty much a DPS weapon because of crit damage, and then an incredibly large amount of attack boosting for absolutely playing to his strong suits. So you're already running pyro characters, which is kind of off meta, kind of running 3 of the same element. And then you also obviously get the bonus from this. So this is going to be his best in slot by a large margin. But again, like I've said, the other ones will work just fine, just not as good as the first Great Magic. But talking about the 4 stars, we don't have a lot of good options here. We really, really don't have a lot of good options. My wholehearted recommendation is the Blackcliff Warbow, just because it's kind of like his signature, but slightly shitter, kind of. You get the crit damage, the base attack, as well as a defeating enemy increases your attack by a further percentage, stacking up to 3 times for 30 seconds. It's kind of like his signature, but slightly worse in terms of the percentage values. So that's going to be my recommendation, is the Blackcliff Warbow for the 4-star. But there's a few other ones that work. You've got the Battle Pass weapons, mainly because of the stat boosting. Obviously, that the new one, the Sign of the Blazing Sun, is fine. You've got the other attack boosting ones. Yeah, I believe Ibis Piercer is Elemental Mastery. You've got Moon's Moon, could give you ultimate, the Elemental Burst damage. The Hamayumi could be charge attack damage. They're all fine, but nothing screams incredibly powerful. Energy recharge weapons, unnecessary. It's a 60 cost elemental burst. It's not going to be too difficult to get a bit of energy recharge as a substat. So 4 stars is a bit of a dry category. And so Blackcliff Warbow, I think, is an easy suggestion, as you can also very easily buy it with some in-game currency very easily as a free-to-play player, as long as you kind of know where you're going with it. So that's going to be my suggestion. Unfortunately, 4-star bows aren't a super strong part of this game's kind of like collage of weapons. Artifacts, though, is an area where there is a very simple answer. Now, let me move myself down here, per se, and I'll move myself around as I go. But there's very easy answers. Now, because he's a pyro character, obviously, you can make something like the Crimson Witch of Flames work, but you're not going to be getting a lot of value out of the full 4 set. But it's fine if you have that as a good kind of substats. You can run a Crimson Witch, you get pyro damage bonus. That's very good. But he does consume HP, remember, and there's 2 sets in the game right now that are built along the idea of consuming HP. One of them is Vermilion Hereafter. Now, this is going to be the one that I recommend as a not the best, but a good substitute. Vermilion Hereafter, 2-set increase attack, and then 4-set summarize. After pressing Elemental Burst, whenever you lose HP, you gain a massive attack increase, and it stacks up to 4 times. This one is the best in slot for Xiao, and as we know, Xiao, after he presses his burst, he drains HP, and so he gets attack increases. And so this one's for Xiao, and if you play Mr. Lyney correctly, i.e. use his burst first, and then use charge attack, skill, charge attack, you can use Vermilion Hereafter just fine. But that's a very specific playstyle, and I'm unsure if that's his best in slot playstyle, right? I'm unsure. It's a very kind of back and forth thing. But if you do play it specifically, Vermilion Hereafter can work very well, as it gives you those boosts. But I don't think it's his best in slot. The other one is going to be the new one coming in Fontaine, which is the Marachusur Hunter. Now, this one's going to be my wholehearted recommendation, as it's simple and straight to the point. 2-set normal and charge attack damage increase by 15%. Now, that's not too great, because his charge attack damage is not, I think, his full part of his kit. It's not his core part of his kit, but it's a part of his kit. So you're getting some value there. But the 4-piece is what you're here for. When your HP, your current HP, increases or decreases, up or down, healing or loss, crit rate will be increased by 11% for 5 seconds, max up to 3 stacks to a total of 33% crit rate increase. That's simply all I will say, because crit rate increase through an easy method is kind of overpowered. Simply put, it's kind of overpowered. Now, this essentially also means that your substats are going to be a little bit more lenient in terms of crit rate requirement. It means that your building is going to be overall better, and it's going to be a lot easier to get much higher value artifacts, as the actual set bonus alleviates the stat requirement. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say. It's a crit rate bonus. It's going to be his best in slot. It releases with Fontaine. You're going to have to pre-farm it, or not pre-farm. You're going to have to post-farm it. And so it's going to be in scarce numbers. But still, this is going to be his best in slot as it plays to his strong suits. I don't want to diminish anyone from trying to run other shit, but good luck with that. Marachusur Hunter will be his best in slot. most likely. And then lastly, talking about characters. Now, this is going to be kind of the closing session, talking about the characters and then final thoughts. The characters and the character team building, it's kind of like streamlined. Like, we have to understand that he does perform better with triple pyro, including himself. So it's going to be him, 2 other pyro characters, and a 4th character. And looking at the 4-star kind of like list of characters, you're going to be running Lyney. Obviously, that's what the video is about, Lyney. So you're going to be running him. That's 1. It's kind of a no-brainer that you're going to be probably running Bennett. Come on. It's kind of obvious that you're going to be running him with him. And so Bennett's going to be the 2nd pyro character. And so now you're stuck with who's the 3rd pyro character. Well, it depends on kind of what you want. If you want a bit of survivability through a shield, then Toma and unfortunately Xinyan are going to be the choices. Xinyan a bit less better or worse than Toma, but regardless, they both provide a shield through some methodology. And so they're going to be the kind of the 3rd recommendation I suggest for the if you need a shielder. Right now, there's no pyro healer, oddly enough, weirdly. I'm not sure why. But that's going to be if you want a shielder. If you want a bit more of a DPS character, then the obvious answer is Zhang Ling. She's unparalleled in the sub DPS department, so that's going to be the DPS choice. Now, I don't want to diminish anyone if you want to try to run Yoimiya with Lyney. Good luck with that one. If you want to run Yanfei or Hu Tao, go for it. I'm not going to stop you, but I wouldn't recommend those ones, at least not for myself. So those are going to be the 3 pyro characters. Now, as for the 4th character, I think it's quite easy, actually. I'll probably just go for an Animo Shredder. I wouldn't recommend going for an Elemental reaction build, as you're not really running Elemental Mastery on the character. Elemental Mastery is not really his thing. And so you're not going to be doing reactions. So I just go for an Animo Shredder. So you got the 3 choices of, if I chuck the filter on here, you've got the 3 choices of, where is she? Kazuha, you've got Venti and Sucrose. Traveler as well works just fine. And I haven't covered Lynette yet. Lynette? I haven't covered her yet, but if she works, go for it. Once I've covered her, I'll maybe clarify. But if she works with the brother, then she can be a great 4th choice. But the ones that I can guarantee right now, Kazuha, Venti, Sucrose, Traveler, even Jean could work just fine if you so want. And so that's going to be my team recommendations. 3 pyros and an Animo, and the characters that I've just named. That's going to be my team recommendations. And that's going to be Lyney. He's a pretty good DPS. He's the 1st character of Fontaine, so nothing too crazy in terms of gameplay. But it's still pretty interesting to some degree. Obviously, there's a bit of back and forth with a charge attack skill ultimate, something along those lines. An interesting character nonetheless. And good luck to people who are rolling for him. I think he's going to be pretty strong. He's not going to be the best pyro character, by the way. I don't believe so. Maybe in terms of raw damage he might, but gameplay is going to be the part that kind of like lowers him a bit, as his gameplay is quite finicky compared to the other characters like Hu Tao and Yoimiya, where their gameplay is press E, charge attack, or normal attack. So his gameplay is a little bit more finicky and has like a bit of variation to it, so it might be a detriment, might be a plus, who knows. But that's going to be Lyney, and that's going to be this video. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.